Last week, we mentioned our new book, Benedict Biden, Water Carrier for the New World Order. As usual, Facebook put a disclaimer at the beginning about the New World Order being a conspiracy theory. This Monday, March 21st, Biden, before the Business Roundtable, said this, quote, "Now is the time when things are shifting, and there's going to be a new world order out there, and we've got to lead it," unquote. We'll see if they post the disclaimer this time. You need to get this book, since it outlines the shifting that Biden wants to do and where he is taking our country. How do they intend to do this? Benedict Biden, Water Carrier for the New World Order, is available at shopjbs.org. We have mentioned before the strategy of pressure from above and pressure from below. This has long been the strategy of those who would impose a communist system on any people. Let me give you a quick historic recap. Communists of today come from generations of families and organizations which started out as obvious communists, but then transitioned into a more elite power structure. In the United States, this process got underway as soon as their failure to stop the Washington administration and the adoption of the Constitution failed. The Jacobins of the late 1700s were similar to the communists of today. Back then, Jacobins infiltrated the Washington administration and a few state governments. However, the Jacobins were too open about their alliance with the street elements from revolutionary France. So the street elements remained somewhat benign for a time, while the upper echelon started to infiltrate the publishing industry, media, historical societies, schools, any and all means which the people relied on for their information and education. Over time, the elite wing of this conspiracy became very important and functioned for a time more into the open just before the Civil War, but submerged again immediately after the war relative to their adherence to what became known as Marxism. They, through the pressure from above and pressure from below, with the American people caught in between, not fully understanding how they were being manipulated, finally were able to get the American people to support initiatives outlined in the Communist Manifesto imposed on the government and thereby the American people. After the election of 1912, they were able to impose two important planks of the manifesto on America, namely the graduated income tax and the central bank, better known as the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve particularly used the tactic. The mega bankers applied the pressure from above, all the while pretending they were against it, and the socialists applied the pressure from below in the name of stopping the bankers. They had already been well on their way by this time, imposing themselves within the government school system and the control of the land, also planks of the manifesto. A big plus of the communists was their advocacy of a democracy. They wanted democracy to be established in any country as the first step toward their communist government away from whatever form the country had to begin with. In our case, a republican system, a republic. It was to move from a republic to democracy to socialism into Marxism. All of this was done using the tactic of pressure from above and pressure from below on the American people. The people were caught between the two forces, not understanding what was being done to them. At the same time, they were taught incorrectly in the government schools, moving us away from the Republican system of government, away from the understanding of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Americans were trained into thinking that whatever the mass opinion of the people is what should be done. Their end goal was, is, and always has been a one-world government. As a result, we got into World War I to defend democracy. When the end result did not get us involved in the League of Nations, they had another war. The result of World War II was the United Nations. Now we see another war being used to strengthen NATO and the European Union, vital to the plans for the scheme for a one-world government. NATO and the EU are stepping stones of regionalism towards destroying the independence of a number of nations toward their end goal. They're using the plight of the people of Ukraine to do this. In the process, they are destabilizing the neighbors of Ukraine through the mass migration of refugees into their countries. This, in the long run, will have a detrimental effect on these countries. Our hearts go out to the Ukrainian people, but we must understand the bigger picture here. The governments of Ukraine have not been much better than the government of Russia. Remember the corruption which involved Hunter Biden and his father. Let me ask you the question, do you want to go to war under the leadership of Biden and the generals that stabbed Trump in the back? The intelligence community that lied to the American people about the Biden corruption and the idea that Trump was somehow a Russian agent? The answer seems quite obvious. The pressure from below is coming from the desire to help the people of Ukraine. The pressure from above is coming from the one world government crowd to strengthen NATO and the EU. George Soros even mentioned in a recent article that the war in Ukraine has strengthened the partnership of Europe and the European Union and NATO. The American people are being placed in a vice. We have to be very careful what and who we support or don't support. We are being played by some very evil megalomaniacs who have been in charge of our political parties and government for years. Why do you think nothing was done to stop or punish the rioting that took place in 2020 and 2021? It involved pressure from below with pressure from above. We live in some very emotional and dangerous times. We have to use our heads and seek out good information with which to make our decisions. Sadly, it cannot be from our current government. They've proven themselves unreliable. We will continue to bring you reliable information as we can. We are continually being censored and having disclaimers placed at the front of our videos if we use certain terms. You probably have noticed this, especially on YouTube. More and more people are waking up to that something is very wrong. Such things as the pandemic and Ukraine are being used to sidetrack people. Don't let them.